Okay, welcome everyone to how leading organizations secure their cloud applications. This is a session sponsored by Palo Alto Networks. My name is Rich Campagna. I'm Senior Vice President of Product Management at Palo Alto Networks for the next generation firewall portfolio. And I'm thrilled today to be joined by four fantastic speakers. Paulina Korostalieva from BP, Jesse Webb from Avalon Healthcare Solutions, Mark Zemanek from Bristol Myers Squibb, and Felix Cesare from Putnam Investors. Each of them are going to be talking about their cloud journey and introducing themselves in just a few minutes. But as we get started here and kicking things off, I want to talk about a few basics that are going to come up throughout the panel discussion that are going to be important fundamentals as we go through each of their journeys. So first up is, what are some of the core trends transforming the security landscape? What is so important about security that all of your organizations continue to make such massive investments across your entire organization, not just in the cloud, but across the organization as a whole? First one is, year by year, we continue to see attackers get more and more sophisticated. More recently, one of the big things has been that a lot of the tools that have historically only been available to nation-state level actors, really well-funded organizations, are now available as, readily available to all levels of adversaries. Even the most novice of bad actors out there have their hands on these tools. And what that means for you in terms of protecting your organization is that these attackers are able to create unique and evasive attacks in ways they haven't been able to do so before, in ways that only the most well-funded actors have been able to do so. So the security landscape is getting more and more difficult. But at the same time, we're doing ourselves a disservice as well. And the reason we're doing that, or the rationale for that, is that security has gotten really, really complicated. As organizations move from premises data centers and premises locations to remote workers in the cloud, not only have we added new additional security functions, but we've done so in a way that it kind of really makes things very disjointed, and typically they don't work well together. So the security architecture gets more and more complex, which makes it difficult to stay on top of it. And as well, at the same time, that complexity is made worse by the fact that there's just a horrible shortage of trained security professionals out there that have the expertise to manage all these individual point products and tools. So on one hand, we have attackers that are getting more sophisticated. On the other, we have a security landscape which is getting more and more complicated and making it more difficult to stay on top of those bad actors. And nowhere is this more critical than in the move to the cloud. So many of you, if you're security professionals out there in the audience, have been tasked with allowing your organization to enable the cloud in a safe and secure way. And there's really two main areas where a lot of that focus has gone over the last couple of years. First one is securing the development of the applications themselves. Across the entire application lifecycle, from the developer writing code all the way through to that application being pushed out and run in production, being able to get a handle on securing the data and securing the fundamentals of the application and the lifecycle tools in which that application resides are critically important. And the second key area is, once you've deployed those secure applications out to the cloud, is protecting communications. Communications from the cloud out to the internet, from the internet back into the cloud, and east-west communications across those cloud environments. And so for the past 10 or so years, probably, Palo Alto Networks has been developing two really comprehensive platforms to address these two use cases. First one is Prisma Cloud. This is a cloud-native application protection platform, or CNAPP, that helps protect that application development lifecycle, integrating in with your development tools, DevOps tools, and of course into cloud environments. And the second one is a platform we call Strata. This is our cloud network security platform that helps protect those communications anywhere they go, into, out of the cloud, and across that cloud environment. And Strata, the network security platform, is going to be the topic of today's session, and specifically how these organizations are using these types of tools, network security tools, to protect their cloud environments. So as we jump into that topic, I think one of the first things that we want to cover in terms of basics and fundamentals, because each of these organizations has deployed these things in a different way, and different elements of this are, what are the typical deployment options? So for a cloud environment, obviously this is an audience that is very heavily deployed in AWS. Many of you may have multi-cloud environments running with other cloud providers. You may have a hybrid cloud environment where you have traditional data centers or private cloud environments that are running there as well. And so depending on where you have that footprint for your applications and data, you may have different deployment options that you choose. So really what's available out there? Virtual machine versions of firewalls, containerized version of firewalls, and cloud-native firewalls that are available directly from cloud service providers, of course, like Amazon Web Services. So what is a virtual machine firewall? Who's it used by and what's it used for? So for organizations that have perhaps a hybrid cloud environment, maybe some private cloud assets internally inside of their premises, as well as public cloud types of environments, virtual machine firewalls have the flexibility to deploy across that entire landscape, so giving you the consistency across everything you have from an application infrastructure standpoint. This is also a type of deployment model that is best suited for organizations that want to manage the infrastructure themselves. So not necessarily the underlying cloud infrastructure itself, but things like availability and reliability of the system or the platform. Things like upgrades of the firewall or security infrastructure software. Things like high availability, auto-scaling, et cetera. Right? And with a virtual machine type of model, you're actually taking a piece of software, deploying it onto some virtual machine service like EC2, and taking full management control over that. This also has the benefit of being typically tied in very closely with premises firewall infrastructure, things like actual physical hardware firewalls that many of you probably deployed across your organization's network. So that's the virtual machine form factor. We're going to hear about that from a couple of the panelists today. Second piece is containerized firewalls. So these, especially for container and Kubernetes heavy shops, these have visibility and threat prevention capabilities built deep into the Kubernetes or the containerized environment context. So for those of you that need to control that communications and implement threat prevention within, let's say, a Kubernetes environment, perfect fit there. Also, we see this used quite often as an alternative for a virtual machine firewall, not necessarily for visibility and prevention inside of the Kubernetes environment, but just for those organizations that prefer a containerized form factor for deployment of a security service like this. And the last piece is the newest piece, and something that, that we've been developing alongside of AWS and other major cloud providers for just the last couple of years now, and these are cloud-native firewalls. So this is a set of capabilities that are delivered as a managed cloud service directly via the AWS console. So for organizations that are looking for a managed service where all of things like auto-scaling, upgrades, all of that underlying infrastructure are taken care of by the cloud provider themselves, this is a perfect fit for those types of organizations. For organizations that want to deploy and manage their security infrastructure directly from the cloud provider's native consoles, another reason why this may be a perfect fit. So think of the VM and the container series firewalls as software you're deploying yourself into your cloud environment, managing kind of from end to end on your own. Cloud native firewalls delivered as a native service directly from AWS and managed directly either via the cloud provider's console or via, in this case, the Palo Alto management third-party firewall tool. So that's kind of some of the basics of what we're going to be hearing about in the panel here. And then just quickly on deployment model. So a number of different ways that firewall services like this can be deployed in a cloud environment. The most common is up here on the screen. So sort of a hub and spoke model where the AWS Transit Gateway, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, acts as that hub. You have applications and data running in various different VPCs across your environment. And as you're trying to protect data, inbound and outbound data into and out of these environments, it goes through the transit gateway into a security VPC where you're going to be deploying your security infrastructure. So just a couple of quick examples. Let's say you have a use case where you want to protect east-west traffic across different applications or different services in different VPCs. What's going to happen here? Traffic originating from the first VPC is going to go through that transit gateway, get pushed through a gateway load balancer where it's going to go and end up at, in this case, what we have pictured here is the virtual machine version of a firewall. That virtual machine version of the firewall is going to do inspection, some of that layer 7 threat prevention capabilities that so many of our customers have invested in us for. And once that traffic is permitted to pass, it's going to come back through the gateway load balancer, through the transit gateway into the terminal VPC where the traffic was intended to go. So this is an example of protecting east-west application in the most common deployment model for this type of service. Now, if that same customer, your same organization, we're doing that same thing, protecting some of that lateral traffic, but with that cloud-managed service firewall, it's essentially the same flow, with the big difference being that that cloud firewall is deployed in the AWS infrastructure, AWS and Palo Alto Networks infrastructure, outside of your VPC, but the same overall traffic flow comes through this infrastructure that's fully managed by AWS and Palo Alto with policies that are implemented by your organization, does the inspection, and then funnels the traffic back into the application itself. So it's important. A number of different sort of design considerations typically come up, but in the last 11 years now of deploying cloud firewalls into AWS in our customer environment, this has emerged as really the most common type of architecture that we see, the most common deployment model. And then, of course, one of the other things we'll talk about here is this notion of a single pane of glass. And when we talk about that, a lot of our customers are moving from, maybe they're not all cloud native types of organizations. They're moving from primarily a premises-based security model with campuses and branches and data centers to more of a cloud-centric model. And one of the key things that a lot of folks are really looking for is a single set of policies that can apply across the board, across all of those things, from the premises data center to private clouds and all the way out to the public cloud as well. Another key element of the security infrastructure we're going to be talking about today. So those are some of the basics. Wanted to cover about the different form factors for these types of security services, the deployment models, and of course, critically always management operations and doing so in a consistent fashion across your entire estate. But you didn't come here to listen to me. You came here to listen to my colleagues that I have here up on the stage with me. And so with that, we're going to open up our panel discussion. And Felix, I know I told you that I wasn't going to pick you first.
Great.
I won't. I'm going to go to Jesse first. So Jesse, maybe just quickly introduce yourselves. We're going to go down the line here for this first piece. Just quickly introduce yourself, your organization, your role, and what does the cloud mean to you or to your organization?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jesse Webb with Avalon Healthcare Solutions. I'm the Senior Vice President of Security and Technology. I manage everything from the cloud infrastructure team, cybersecurity, technology support, so all aspects of infrastructure and support other than software development. The development team is, of course, one of our customers. Avalon's about 10 years old, and we were born in the cloud in AWS, and we have never had a physical data center or a physical server. So we're 100% cloud. And the nice thing about being a small company, or a healthcare company, startup, we were able to do a lot of things right up front. And so we started with zero trust and hyper-segmentation before those were even terms that are being bandied about. We separated out all of our development and our escalation levels, and each of those had their own firewalls. So as we continue to grow and have a data environment, a development environment for offshore, all these different firewalls were becoming unmanageable. And so, while the security and the segmentation were great in some ways, it became a management headache for a small company. But the cloud has enabled a small startup healthcare company to look and operate like a large enterprise. And so AWS has been a great partner to us, so is Palo Alto. And we're also high trust certified and have been for 6 of our 10 years. So to have that level of high trust and security maturity, wouldn't be possible in a physical data center. Operating in AWS has allowed us to accomplish that.
Great. So, Polina, I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing your organization might be a little bit older than 10 years old, and you certainly weren't born in the cloud. Tell us about your...
A little bit.
Yeah.
I'm Polina Korostyleva. I work for BP as a principal security architect for our digital enterprise. My main focus is on cloud and application security. So we've been moving to cloud probably for the past few years. We're now 80% in the cloud. We've got a multi-cloud strategy. And I think as the next steps, we're looking at containerization and serverless architectures.
Excellent. Mark?
Hi, I'm Mark Zemenek. I work for Bristol Myers Squibb. I'm a senior cloud architect. Work primarily on the networking components within AWS as well as Azure and GCP. We went all in probably 8 to 10 years ago in the cloud, so we've moved our SAP environment, which is extremely large, onto bare metal and US East 1. We have a very complicated but slick DevOps environment. Not my area, I'm more in the infrastructure. So we've built across 9 AWS regions transit gateways that peer to each other, so like a mesh, so they can, kind of like you would almost in a corporate WAN. And originally, we did not have inspection capabilities in our design, but as we were moving along and realizing, you don't get that many opportunities at that level, right at the core infrastructure. So we started looking at inspection capabilities as the gateway load balancer was coming out. The AWS firewall was the only thing that could really be scalable and highly available when we started. And as the gateway load balancer came out, the Palos quickly adopted them and allowed us to build an environment where, similar to the picture he has up, in every region, we have a transit gateway with all the VPCs in that region, and we have several hundred VPCs across the globe. All the VPCs in that region are connected to the transit. The transit, for those VPCs, has one route. The default route sends everything to the inspection VPC, where there's an auto-scaling group of Palo Alto firewalls. So those firewalls go through, if it passes the rules, threat prevention, our policies, it either goes out to the internet if it's internet bound, or if it's any of our RFC 1918 or any of our personal networks, it goes back to the transit gateway, and it can go through a direct connect to get on-prem. It can go east-west through peering connections off the transits. And the beauty of it for the Palos, for me personally, is the panorama, because we have thousands, probably over 10,000 rules for applications, but they're managed very simply in a pair of panoramas that deploy to the firewalls in all the regions, as well as the firewalls in GCP and Azure. So since we have the network connectivity built where all the clouds can see each other, as well as on-prem, we can manage everything from those pair. So if I push a rule out, that application A and US East 1 can talk to application B in Frankfurt. The rule is automatically gets pushed out everywhere. There's not a lot of complexity, so it helped make the environment very simple. Our routing is very simple. The VPCs have one route in the route tables on the transit. The only thing that knows how to get everywhere is the route table associated with the security VPC. So we get a lot of traffic. Manufacturing, all of our financials, our R&D. So if we have an outage or any problems, there's 150 people on a phone call asking what we did and why we did it. But we've been, I think we've been very successful to date, and Palo's been a very good partner for us, especially being that this was kind of like the .0 release. When that gateway load balancer came out, there was a little bit of fear. How long will it take them to actually, work? But, we've had minimum bumps in the roads, and they've been a really good partner for us.
Excellent. Yeah, and Panorama, of course, is the central management platform that Palo Alto has available. So, Felix, everyone here works in a different industry. You're in financial services, obviously some unique challenges.
Yeah.
Tell us about your organization and your cloud journey.
Sure. So my name is Felix Asari. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity Operations and Deputy CISO for Putnam Investments. So just like he said, in the financial services industry, when it comes to actually asset management capability, we rank number one in that. We have about $187 billion on AUM. So if you think about financial services, everyone wants us to manage their money, but also, most importantly, not lose their money. So wealth management is really, really, really big for us. But how do we do that? How do we scale? How do we move fast? And then how do we compete with all the competitors that we have out there? That's where cloud came in. So unlike Jesse, we were not born in the cloud. We were actually on-prem. We had data centers all over, but we decided to start a digital transformation journey and then move all of our assets into the cloud. Now, the challenge was, how can we move into the cloud and not make as much change so that our shareholders do not feel any of that? And that's where security became key. So just like you were saying, I definitely don't want to have any phone call, having 150 people getting on a call. Nope, that's not going to happen. I want to enjoy my vacation when I'm on vacation, and I want to work while I'm working. So for us, we had specific requirements. Security was key, zero trust, definitely. We wanted a player in the market space that had a reputation, that was innovating. Two, we also wanted an environment where we could easily scale. And since we're moving from on-prem and into the cloud, we didn't want to have to look at 300 different pieces of data and different charts and all of that. We wanted to have a single pane of glass so we can see all of our policies being applied. And that's what Palo Alto did for us. So after we went through our requirements, sandboxing was also key, and I think we can talk more about that later. We listed the requirements, we did a lot of POCs, and even though we had them on-prem, it made sense because of the innovation that Palo Alto kept on going on, and we wanted to be a part of the journey. So that was our journey.
Gotcha, that's perfect. So Felix, maybe I'll continue on with you. So, you know, as you go through that decision-making process when moving to the cloud, and I want to go back to Jesse in a minute here because he's got a really unique perspective on being born in the cloud and being able to start from scratch. So hopefully he's done everything right. But you know, in terms of that migration and that journey, how do you know, it's not necessarily obvious in a premises data center, in a campus location. It's always been obvious that we're just going to deploy firewalls and this is what we're going to do. Is that obvious as you start to move to the cloud, that a firewall and some of the layer 7 security services that have been built on top of firewalls over the years, is it obvious that that is the move you're going to make? And what are the different options available out there outside of course, obviously you went with Palo Alto?
Yeah, well, I think several ways. It depends on how you look at it. You can look at it purely from the security standpoint, but also you have to look at your capability. For us at that particular moment, we did not have of course, the workforce because of all the changes that was going on to even be able to manage some of the solutions that were out there. So if we look at cloud posture management, it made sense to use Prisma Cloud because we did not have tons, 150, 200 people. No, we had very few people that were skilled. And we needed a tool where they didn't have to spend a lot of time getting PhDs and writing policies. They could easily deploy it. It will give us the violations, and it's easy to fix, just like that. So for our capability, those were the things that made sense for us.
Gotcha. What was the hardest thing about securing the cloud? Not necessarily, I mean, whether it's with deploying Palo Alto products or something more, you know, just the initial decision making. What were like the big challenges you ran into that folks in this room that are earlier in their journey may run into?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges was basically knowing what containers were out there, which ones were secure, which ones were not secured, and then really making sure that we could identify and track users while they were using the tools. That was the biggest thing for us. And Prisma Cloud made it easy, really.
Were your cloud users out ahead of security? So oftentimes I have conversations with organizations where, hey, a bunch of stuff was deployed into the cloud, and we're now trying to play catch up.
Yep.
Was that the case in your organization, and how did you deal with that?
I don't know if I should say this on camera,
Okay. No, everyone put your cameras down. Sorry, there's one in the back of the room. We can't turn it on.
You know, security most of the time is usually the last to come to the game.
Yep.
And we were trying to change that. So we're in the financial services industry. We have a trading desk. People are trading every single time. They want to get applications out there. They want to get it out there quickly. They didn't want us to come stop them. So there were several times where we had accounts that we had no idea about. So the challenge was bringing people to our thought process. We are here to enable you to do business faster and not stop you. Hopefully that answered your question.
It answers the question. Still, I hear, sorry, I know there's a whole panel.
That's okay.
I'm not going to focus on you the whole time.
You should.
What were the friction in dealing with those other teams? Though you find all these AWS accounts that are out there that are being in use. They're not governed today, and now you want to come in and say, hey, we're going to put some governance on top of this, some security policy.
Yep.
I don't imagine that's an easy conversation.
No, but it really came down to showing the value, and letting the teams that we're working with know that we are all one team and we are here to help you move faster. That's it. It was really a matter of cultural change and lots of conversations, a lot of them.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You make it sound easy.
That's my job.
So Jesse, very different, you know, sort of cloud journey for you. You have had the unique, I mean, you've been with Avalon since the very beginning. You've had this unique opportunity to kind of embed security into your cloud environment from the very beginning. I don't imagine that makes it much easier than what Felix just described, and coming in late. But you know, what are some of the things you learned along the way when building security in from the very start?
One of the nice things about getting the opportunity to have a complete greenfield opportunity is you do take a lot of your lessons learned from other corporations, and you can build a lot of it into your people, your culture, your processes, and your technology. At first, when we were hiring administrators, we weren't hiring like a Linux administrator, we were hiring a Linux security administrator. I mean, it's like everybody's role was security. So we built it into the culture, and that was supported from leadership top down. Then segmentation, you know, like I said, we, as a small company, like when we only had 10, 15 employees, we were trying to convince health plans to give us 3 years of their claim history. So we had to be fully HIPAA compliant. We had to look like a large enterprise, even though we were a small group. Being in a cloud, taking those best practices, setting them up front, allowed us to pass all the audits and for our customers to have confidence into giving us 3 years worth of claim data. And so it made a big difference in getting Avalon from a PowerPoint to actually a live operating company.
So if you had it to do over again, go back 10 years and start fresh again, what are some of the things, if anything, that you might do differently in terms of your approach?
We probably would have gotten more into automation and infrastructure as code from day one. You know,
Okay.
So a lot of us came from like the traditional legacy IT operations type of world. You know, the GUI, set up network, set up, you know, the point and click. You know, we're going to build out the network through the interface. We're moving into significant automation capabilities using Terraform, using Lambda, and other tools to make sure that we're starting to move everything to infrastructure as code. That way we can scale it. We want to be able to build out in another region using those kind of automation and scripts. So starting from the very beginning, I would have focused a whole lot more on those capabilities.
Gotcha. Okay. So, Paulina, it occurs to me as we go through this panel, we haven't really talked too much about like what are the types of things that we're trying to protect. I mean, I think a lot of people, when they think of a firewall, they think of some layer 3, layer 4, you know, stateful inspection type of capability. But over the years, firewalls have evolved to be much more than that. What were, you know, as you went through that cloud migration journey and started thinking about implementing security infrastructure, what are you trying to actually prevent from happening, and how do these sets of services fit into that?
Yeah, so I think we were looking at securing our egress traffic, you know, to begin with. And we looked at some native offering, you know, AWS network firewall, as you mentioned before. It didn't meet all of our security requirements because we were looking at, you know, application layer, filtering, inspection, category-based filtering, malware prevention, SSL decryption capabilities. So that's where we looked at the Palo Alto Cloud Firewall, but also not just from the security perspective, you know, from operational requirements perspective. We looked at something that is a managed service and as close to native, you know, offering as possible as well. Mm-hmm. So I think for us, yeah, Palo Alto ticked, you know, most of those boxes.
Gotcha. So why were you looking for something natively integrated? What is the benefit to your organization?
Because it's the ease of management and operations. Our Palo Alto Cloud Firewall now, it's managed and owned by our AWS platform teams. So it's not really something that the security manages. So they created the policy from the ground up, you know, a very granular policy, and lots of work went into it. And they work now with application teams in terms of, you know, refining this policy as well. So we didn't need any like specialized firewall management, you know, resources, skills for that. Mm-hmm. And scalability as well. Obviously, no need to manage the infrastructure. That's a big plus as well.
Gotcha. So of the various deployment options I talked about before, your organization is using that cloud native firewall delivered as a service from AWS.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. So how does so you have your team, security architecture team. There's the AWS platform team, as you called it, inside of your organization. There's the development team. Tell me or tell the audience, how does kind of the interplay work across those teams, and what are the sources of frictions? Where are things going well? Where not so well?
Yeah, so I think we try to collaborate as much as possible. So we try to be seen from the security perspective, not as a blocker, but as something like enabling the business, you know, cloud platforms, our development teams. So from the security architecture perspective, we did take part in a product selection. We did fit in our security requirements. But then obviously the operation, the policy creation, that all sits with our platform teams. And then they work actually directly with application teams in terms of refining those policy and calling out any, security like bad practices, but also calling out any kind of, network design anti-patterns. So I think the ability to have the data from your firewall and look at this data and then talk to application development teams with this data and saying this is where you can improve, that was a really big advantage as well.
Gotcha. Okay. And how about you, Mark? I think you mentioned it in your intro, but which of the deployment models have you chosen to use?
Yeah, I think the one where we manage it is been the most beneficial for us. It has the complexity of, like you had said, there's EC2 instances and auto-scaling groups, but when you're troubleshooting, it's so much easier to just be able to pop on a host and is the traffic even reaching me? You can run a sniff on a port and see if, hey, it's not even getting here, or, so having an endpoint of a service in certain cases is terrific. Mm-hmm. But the flexibility and the visibility into the environment, as well as the scalability, has been very beneficial using the auto-scaling group and the gateway load balancer.
Gotcha. So you've chosen to manage all that infrastructure as well as the firewalls themselves.
Right. And we're constantly reviewing. So every year, that's one of the reasons we get permission to come here is, there's Cloud WAN now, right? So Cloud WAN, like everything, anybody who's worked with AWS, the minute you build something, it's obsolete, right? So you built this whole transit network across the globe and everything's working terrific, and 3 hours later, hey, well, how do you do it that way? Why don't you use this new tour service that came out an hour and a half ago? So unfortunately, network outages are the hardest thing to get in the company, right? So we try to piggyback on like SAP Windows and things like that to put changes in. So it's a big deal, and maybe one of the biggest deals is even when new versions come out, we try to get on a version of the VM series that has not necessarily the best features. We want it to be reliable, but we're trying to get a window of that 42 months that release will be out, because that gets me 3 years before I have to go to management and go, we need to put $1 million project in to upgrade the firewall infrastructure across the company. So that's kind of the kind of things we manage.
Gotcha.
Year to year.
And that last point is just you're on a quest for stability, and you're not alone. A lot of organizations, want to have some stability in something like a fundamental security infrastructure component like a firewall.
Exactly.
What you're saying is that you wait to upgrade, and there have been bugs before in our software. There will be again.
Everybody's, right? Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay, I think that's an important consideration point of why you might use the.
Right. And a big part was putting a capability in place. So we're really using threat and services. So I'm making sure nobody's running telnet on port 443, right? The Palo automatically blocks it. It looks at the port and goes, hey, that's 443, the well-defined port for SSL. Why has somebody got telnet traffic on it? And it'll block the traffic. And then we use the threat prevention, which the Palos automatically update. So they get the latest hour, every few hours if something comes out, you'll have the latest threat detection files out there. But there's a ton of, we probably use 5% of what the Palos can do. We work closely with our security team to say, hey, here's the capabilities, but if there's something we want to enable, wildfire or something around mail or something like that, we have the infrastructure already in place. So it's not like we got to now take an outage and change everything. We can enable a service that we already have in place. We test it first and things like that. So it definitely, the capabilities of Palo, as they're adding more and more features, it's already baked into the infrastructure, so we don't have to, plan for a change to implement a new service when you guys have new releases.
So let me ask a bit of a process question. So theoretically, or hypothetical situation, you have a new team inside of your organization spinning up a new application, deploying into AWS. Maybe it's a net new account or into new VPCs. What does the process look like? You're at some point become aware that this is going to happen, and there's perhaps a new set of security rules. So who's responsible for those rules?
So everything we have in AWS, and we're trying to do this in the other clouds as well, is infrastructure as code. So we have a really slick DevOps environment that when a new application comes in, somebody submits the project online, if it gets approvals, in theory, within 10 minutes, the whole environment can be built. But as they're building out things that need firewall updates, the DevOps environment is going in and adding all the well-defined, pre-approved by security rules to the environment. So if they need something that's not, they need Telnet, which we don't allow by default. Those type of things require exceptions. But we're very streamlined in how quickly we can build out an environment. Like I said, generally minutes we can build a VPC. In the old world, before the transit gateway, we used to build monster VPCs and have 100 applications in there. The problem was you're writing these IAM rules to say Susie's app can't talk to Billy's app, but now all of a sudden they need to, or our dev can't talk to prod, right? So you're managing at IAM things that you really don't, or in security groups, things you really don't want to do. In the new world, with the Palos in place, everything can be firewalls. So now every application gets its own VPC. Like I said, I think we're over 1,000, 2,000 VPCs. But they spin up like this, and all the rules are in place for the well-defined services instantly. And it's not difficult to have exceptions, but the exceptions have to go through security and get approved. But it's all automated. If it gets approved security, it automatically, the rule gets pushed into the panorama and out to all the firewalls without any person having to be involved in the process.
Excellent, excellent. So Jesse, I know, so Polina's certainly using the cloud-managed firewall. Mark, his organization has chosen to use deploy on their own VM series firewall. I know your organization is sort of looking at a migration from one of those models to the other. So what goes into that thought process, and how is that going?
Yeah, so we initially got started with another third-party firewall, and we migrated to the Palo Alto virtual firewalls. And so that runs our main connectivity in our main environment. As I mentioned before, we have a hyper-segmented environment, and we were actually building out a brand new dev environment when you guys made this announcement. So as we were building this out, the network team came back and said, hey, Palo's now got a cloud-based firewall. This would allow us to scale as well as to manage in a single pane of glass. So we were early adopters in this. The dev environment, one of the reasons why we set this one up completely separate as a completely separate account is because the DevOps team wanted to fully take advantage of a lot of new cloud-native capabilities, and so they needed full account-level rights into it. And being in a patient environment, we didn't want to give dev or DevOps the ability to go play in the main account. So we set up that account siloed by itself. Nothing but dummy data, and that's where we did our first implementation of the next-gen cloud firewall. And now we're starting to promote, like I said, we were going to replace all those third-party firewalls with more virtual firewalls, but now we're actually replacing them with the cloud next-gen. And at that point, then we're at a pause before we actually replace the production virtual firewalls. So we're waiting for one more feature to come out. And so as that feature comes out, based upon how we're designed and how we communicate with our customers, we can't just turn it on. It wouldn't be a transparent change for us.
Gotcha, okay. And it just so happens the product manager responsible for that feature is somewhere in this audience. So I can't see, though, because there's too many lights in my eye. But he's out here somewhere, so if you track him down, you might be able to pin him. Just kidding. As you know, we're working together on that. So you've been through a third-party firewall, now the VM firewall, cloud next generation firewall. Maybe one thing that's come up a couple of times, just sort of briefly during the panel discussion here, AWS has a native firewall as well, the AWS Network Firewall. I know a couple of your organizations have looked at that and looked at things like the Palo Alto firewall. What are some of the decision criteria and where might you use one versus the other? Felix, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess. Okay.
Felix, you back? Go ahead.
My back?
No, they didn't want to hear from you anymore.
Yeah.
Just
Maybe
kidding.
they turned it off.
Yeah, okay, we lost his mic.
Do you want to use the...
Yeah, okay, let's do that.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
All right, so you're talking about decision-making criteria for...
Yeah, so there's a native firewall from AWS, first-party service, and then there's these couple of deployment models that someone like Palo Alto offers. Did you look at the native model, and what were some of the differences, distinctions?
Yeah, I think for us, the biggest thing was being able to scale and then the automation piece.
Okay.
again, we didn't want to spend a lot of time doing automation on our own. So if it came with policies that were already pre-built and easy to push out, made it easy for us. That's how we pick.
Gotcha. Okay. Jesse. Yeah.
So as we took a look at the firewall capabilities, here's the great thing about AWS, and anyone that's actually been operating in AWS knows, like they're load balancers. Very simple, built for purpose, very efficient, and they make excellent load balancers. So they don't need a third party for that. Their firewall is very straightforward. It connects into their fabric, and here's what's nice about having Palo Alto working with AWS and being plugged in natively to AWS is now I get all of your security capabilities as well as the confidence that we have in Palo Alto's threat intelligence, all your add-on tools. So, you go above and beyond and do a lot more in the security space than Amazon's basic firewall, okay? But the fact that you can integrate into them is what's fantastic, and one of the reasons why we like that, because that's single pane of glass. And then you were talking about functionality in the dev environment. The other thing is our DevOps team is a very sharp group, and they really have a lot of capabilities. The fact that it reports into CloudWatch, and DevOps can see every firewall rule fire, so if they're testing an application, they can go look themselves exactly where they had a problem, which is a great capability without necessarily actually having to let them in the firewall.
Gotcha. Okay. Other thoughts? Mark, Polina?
No, I'll be honest with you, I'm normally a huge fan of using the cloud provider services. I'm CloudFormation. There's a lot, we use Terraform and GCP and Azure, but I'm a huge CloudFormation fan because it's the vendor. If I'm 3 o'clock in the morning and we have that 150 person on the call, somebody's going, listen, Terraform, that's not even us. It could be your Terraform. So you never really wanted to have the vendors having the ability to point the fingers at each other, but the firewall features are, it would be like somebody who wanted to use Oracle a few years ago or, Access on the PC. The delta is just so big, and Palo provides so many features and such good functionality. There's a few places we've done that. Palo is one of the few. We have some F5s for like load balancing, largely because we did a monster lift and shift environment when we went to AWS and to the cloud. And there were a lot of I rules, if anybody knows the F5s, the big IPs. There was things that were unique to the environment that we had to bring over. But normally we like to use the native services. Palo is one of the exceptions just because of the what it brings to the table is just such a big delta from what Amazon offers natively.
Gotcha. Polina, any thoughts on?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned before, for us, the security capabilities were much more superior. And I think that Jesse mentioned around the threat intelligence and all other things that you guys bring, your expertise in security. I also think for us it was more cost effective, the Palo Alto firewall compared with AWS network firewall.
Perhaps our sales team gave you a good discount. Okay, so obviously we're on the tail end of the year here, coming into FY24, calendar 24. I'm sure each of you have, some plans and ambitions for how you take not just firewall deployment, but cloud security overall forward for your organization heading into the next year. I'd love to get thoughts from each of you on that. Jesse, I know you talked about automation, some of what you're building into your program moving forward. Is that kind of the next big thing for you in terms of future plans that you want to take on?
I think that's one of the things we like about the cloud next-gen firewall is we'll be able to manage it like code, and we'll be able to deploy the rules to other regions. That's a great capability. So that just fits right in with our current journey. Other things for FY24, building out, like I said, that capability to scale systems cross region. Some of these guys are already here, but again, being a small company, for us to actually leave US East 1 and actually auto scale out into US West, that's a big change for us. And if we were managing multiple firewalls, that'd be a problem for us. So when we go out to the West, another cloud firewall managed by Panorama, that'd just make our life very easy. And we're, what, a couple $100 million company, and I have basically one firewall administrator backed up by his boss. So we're managing this entire environment. So 8 accounts, 20 plus VPCs, and I've got one firewall administrator. So moving to the cloud next-gen firewall is huge for allowing us to scale without having to scale my staff.
Gotcha. Okay, and that's critical. I think critical regardless of size of organization. Everyone's too short on security expertise. Polina, thoughts for the future?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned, we are multi-cloud, so we're looking to use your product in another cloud environment. We also then need to make a decision wherever we're going to manage, firewalls from your Panorama console or your new, I think it's a Cloud Firewall Manager or Strata?
It's called Strata Cloud Manager.
Strata Cloud Manager. Yeah, and another one is we are using your Prisma Cloud for cloud security posture management. So I think we're looking to see how the integration between your network security platform and Prisma Cloud could look like and what benefits it could bring to us.
Excellent. Mark?
Next year, I think the couple things on the plate for us would be IPv6 piloting. So in our container space, we're eating up a lot of IPv4 space. So we've already started a pilot environment. We've built out a whole set of VPCs across several regions for IPv6, and we'll start probably in January or February building out a inspection VPC that supports IPv6 traffic, as well as an 11.1 upgrade for us next year. That's just coming out as we speak, and then we're looking to take advantage of that 42 months of uninterrupted service that'll provide.
So you're going to upgrade to our latest and greatest.
To your latest,
software.
yeah, the bleeding edge, exactly, yes. That's the goal, at least.
Gotcha. Okay. Felix, bring this part home.
Unlike Mark, we have one more data center to close. I said, unlike Mark, we have one more data center to close. So we want to go full on into the cloud, no more on-prem. And we actually want to look at what the integrations for Prisma Cloud would be in terms of the code piece. So something that we want to explore and then learn more about what we can. I feel we can do a whole lot more. We've just been kind of tinkering around, so we're ready.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me take just a minute here to wrap a couple things up. You heard excellent testimonials and a lot about the journey from each of these organizations today. Palo Alto has been in the software firewall, specifically the cloud firewall market, for, as of 2 weeks ago, 11 years now. So obviously dominant in terms of market share. I think you heard from the customers here, what really some of the key benefits are. Flexibility across the various different deployment form factors for whatever it is that your organization needs in the cloud. The benefit of one of the largest threat intelligence organizations on the planet, with taking an input from nearly 100,000 organizations, seeing all the threats that are available globally, and then quickly distributing them out to millions of firewalls, both in the cloud and in premises globally. So just the power of scale and the power of the flexibility required to support any use case in your environment. So we talked a lot about today about network security in the cloud. Felix and Polina, you both talked a little bit about our cloud security platform, Prisma Cloud. So this is that piece that's integrating into your development tools, your DevOps pipeline, into your cloud environment to get a handle on configuration of the infrastructure, get a handle on the strength, the quality of the code going into those applications, get a handle on where you have sensitive data and helping to protect that. Works very closely hand in hand with this network security platform, which is controlling all those communications into and out of and across your cloud environments. And then the third platform we didn't talk about today, this is Cortex Security Operations Platform, available from Palo Alto. So this is the full breadth of functionality that we have available. But as I started out here in saying, it's really all about protecting that application lifecycle with something like Prisma Cloud, and then protecting communications within and across your environment with the Strata Network Security Platform. So all of these are available there. I'm going to end here. A couple of QR codes here. If on the left is that DIY Virtual Machine Series Next-Gen Firewall. This is a link to a marketplace listing where you can get a free trial of this. On the right is the Cloud Next Generation Firewall. So this is that cloud managed service. Of course, if you can't get a handle on that QR code, please go ahead and stop by booth 832, which is the Palo Alto Networks booth. We have a lot of our experts available on staff throughout the week to answer all your detailed questions, give you demos, whatever the case may be. Also, we'll be up here for about 10 minutes. We purposely ended this panel discussion about 10 minutes early. So we will be up here to take on any questions that you may have individually. So feel free to kind of come up at the end of the session and ask some questions. So I want to thank the panelists for being out here, and I want to thank all of you for attending. Enjoy the show.